Today, I'm going to be sharing something that I haven't shared on this channel because it's deeply personal. But this month marks 30 years since I became an above-the-knee amputee at age 13. If you're new to this channel, I'm Jody, and my family has been traveling the world full-time since 2022. Now, I've shared several videos about tips and things you need to know about travel while being an amputee, but I've never shared my story. Today we're going to talk about how I became an amputee and how it has shaped the person I am today. Before I dive into how I became an amputee, I want to share a little bit of my life before. When I was 3 years old, I started dance lessons. Nothing super unusual about that, but I took it very seriously. By 12, I was spending most afternoons and evenings at the dance studio. Rehearsals and classes took up most of my time. I ate dinner at the dance studio. I did homework there. So at 13, when I was diagnosed with bone cancer or osteosarcoma, my life completely changed. So naturally, my story starts at the dance studio. And the way that I noticed that something was happening with my leg was during dance class. I was trying to do an arabesque, and every single time I extend my leg out, my knee just didn't feel quite right. It felt like my kneecap wasn't sitting in the right place. It felt like it was pulling. And so I decided to go ahead and take a break during class. And when I sat down and was really looking at it, I noticed that my left knee looked different than my right knee, and it was tender to the touch. That was my first little sign that something was not quite right. I had also sustained a couple of injuries on that side over the previous year. My kneecap had popped out of position while doing work at the bar, and I had sprained my ankle twice on my left side. In hindsight, I know that those were all probably a little bit connected because that tumor was causing holes on my tendons and ligaments, and everything was not quite strong in the way that it should have been. But, hindsight, you couldn't have known beforehand. I went to the doctor the next day. My mom immediately thought, well, something's wrong. Let's take you in. And I saw my doctor's face turn ghostly white as she looked at my knee. She knew immediately that it was not good. And that day, I went in and got a series of tests on bone scans, blood draws. It was a full day at the hospital. It all happened extremely quickly. And then the next morning, I went in for my biopsy. Things were happening so quickly, I was not really able to process what was happening. And one of the big things that I woke up with after my biopsy was a port. They were so sure that it was cancer that they put the port in during the biopsy. And I had no idea that it was going to be there. So waking up with a tube coming out of your chest was not something that I really planned for, but also I'm not sure I would have been able to plan for it anyway. Finding it, doctor next day, biopsy next day, and then it was time to make decisions. Biopsy came back, it's cancer, and the immediate obvious choice was to do an amputation. My tumor was located right above my left knee, and there are really two options in this case. You can do an amputation and you can do a bone graft. I really was given the opportunity to consider this myself. My parents gave me the space to really think about it. It was my body. And while I was guided along in this decision, ultimately it was my choice. And amputation made the most sense for me. One, it had the best survival rate. And I immediately realized that surviving this ordeal was going to be of utmost importance. And two, it meant less surgeries down the road. A bone graft often needs many surgeries as you grow and as you change, and then there is often fracturing and splintering around where the graft is put in place, and that did not seem like something I wanted to deal with in the future. So I opted to have my leg amputated. Now, unfortunately, the doctor did have to go higher in the amputation than what we originally thought, because there was more cancer there than what they kind of originally thought in the imaging. And the less femur you have, the less control you have. So I have a very, very short femur, and my doctor did the best he could to leave me enough of residual limb so that my socket would fit on well. And I think he made the right choice. I was really grateful that I could rely on his expertise. Now, when my doctor told me that he was 90% sure that it was bone cancer, my first reaction was complete denial. I said, "No, I can't do that. I have Nutcracker rehearsal on Saturday. We are starting with all of these things. I just auditioned. I have no time for that." Of course, my priorities quickly shifted. From the day that I very first went to the doctor to the day that I had my amputation was 1 week. 1 week, and my leg was gone. It was not very much time to think about or process it, but it felt good to be taking action against something that could potentially be deadly. Now, this video isn't going to be really all about my cancer journey and the chemo I went through and everything. If you're interested in hearing more about that, I'm happy to share about that. But being on chemotherapy for a whole year after my amputation definitely changed my rate of recovery. I was undergoing a lot during that first year, and so my priority really just wasn't learning how to walk. I did immediately get fitted for a prosthetic. I very quickly was moving more than what the initial prosthetics were giving to me. I was actually moving so much that they were breaking. But so pretty quickly I got put into what is called a suction socket, and that's a socket that fits by vacuum onto your residual limb. That process of learning and relearning how to walk took a long time. I did have very good balance and I was very strong, but I wasn't very motivated at first. So I always wore my prosthetic and I walked with crutches. I didn't use a wheelchair, and I do feel like that was good because it always meant that I was, even though I wasn't walking with a lot of weight bearing, I was still stretching and walking in the way that I was beneficial to future walking. And I was at the time in 8th grade and then eventually a freshman in high school during this year. And during that 8th grade year, I basically just didn't go to school. They had a tutor that came and helped me. So that period, I really had not very much reason to walk. Once I was wanting to go back to school, I started going back to school for orchestra and lunch. Those were my priorities. So I did that, and then eventually I wanted to go back whenever I could, whenever I wasn't on my chemotherapy treatments, which was basically 1 week of chemo, maybe 1 week, maybe 2 of no chemo. When I was going to school and everything, I was on my crutches, I was moving so much more, and eventually I just got really tired of having the crutches. And once I was tired of having those, it was a pretty quick move to just walking. I used a cane for about a month, and then I was tired of having that too, because it uses your hands. The thing that always annoys me about being on my crutches is that I haven't just lost my leg, I've lost use of my hands. I can't carry very much with being on crutches. So it just makes it so much harder to get around. That tendency to want to move and use my hands is really what pushed me from being on crutches and a cane to walking all the way. I also had a cover on my leg for a really long time and generally wore clothes to cover up my leg. I did not show it the way that I do now, which is all the time, everywhere. My leg is always out and about, so and that was a change that came later in my young adulthood. My first several years of being an amputee were really about trying to get better at walking, trying to be able to walk further. I was pretty stable, but I definitely had little techniques in order to help my stability more. Because I was pretty strong from my dancing background, I was able to maintain a lot of that muscle and strength. And but I still fell a lot because something would just catch and my knee would collapse underneath me. And I got really good at it. I got really good at falling. I could fall in a way that I wouldn't get hurt. I could fall in a way that I could be holding something and not drop it. All sorts of things like that. So I knew kind of how to hit the ground well. It's a weird skill to have, but I definitely developed. I was falling enough that I definitely developed it. And then in 2002, I got my first computerized knee. I cannot tell you the story of my computerized knee and getting that first one without telling you about the fight that it took to get that first computerized knee. You gotta remember, this is a while ago and the insurance system looked different than it does now. It was harder in some ways and easier in others. Pre-existing conditions still existed. I was young enough that I was still on my parents' insurance, but it was a really new thing. Computerized knees just had not been out for very long. And so when I first submitted to get it, it was denied. And we had to start going through the appeal process. So we went through the appeal process, and I say we, my parents were supporting me through this. We gathered data, we gathered stories, including a story of an amputee who had been in the Twin Towers on 9/11 and had made it down the stairs because of a knee that could go step over step. I included data about, maintaining my health better because I wasn't falling, because I could be more active. But the back and forth, we went through multiple appeals, and it took 6 months. The final straw that finally gave it is the appeal where my parents went in personally and showed them photos, talked about how active I was, how I like to hike, how I was a young woman with a whole life ahead of me, and that finally made it so that they approved my knee. Now, once I got a computerized knee, I did not want to cover anymore. It took 6 months to fight for that thing. I wanted every penny of functionality, and a foam cover decreases your functionality some. So I wanted it to work at its absolute optimal best, and I was willing to finally go without a cover because of that. Now, there's nothing wrong with covers. I think they're fine, but it was a change for me in my identity as an amputee and in my self-confidence of doing things the way that I wanted to instead of feeling like I should. It definitely, the cover for me wasn't about standing out, it was about blending in. That first computerized knee changed my life so deeply. I could manage walking on grass and uneven surfaces, hiking routes from trees, all sorts of ramps, stairs, especially going down. Using ramps and being able to utilize my knee instead of keeping the knee straight and using my back was huge. I could walk further. My endurance was better. It was so life-changing that I could imagine a lot more of what I was capable of than before. Computerized knees are amazing, and I cannot wait to see where this technology continues to grow. Since then, I've had 2 more computerized knees, 3 in total, and I am about to try to get a new one because mine is starting to break. So it is always a little bit of a battle to get one. I always have to make sure my ducks are in a row, and even then, sometimes they make me go through the appeal process. It's never been as much of a battle as that first one, but it's always something that makes me feel a little bit nervous because of the system that we have. Someday, I dream of getting the top computerized knee because I've always had one that wasn't fully waterproof. So water is always been a little bit of a point of anxiety for me because I don't want to have to choose, have to panic about breaking my leg. And especially when our kids were little, water was tricky because I just did not feel like I could adequately move and be near water without a fear of my leg and keeping my kids safe and all of that. So water's always given me a little bit, with my prosthetic on, a little hesitation. So having one that was like fully waterproof would be amazing. Not that I would like go and get it wet a ton, but I just could walk on the beach and not worry about it as much, or little things like that. Just feel like I don't have to have a constant little nag of, is that going to be too wet? Because of my cancer diagnosis and being an amputee and kind of having this second chance at living a long life, I definitely felt like I wanted to have kids. That was a part of life that I wanted to experience and I wanted to share with a partner and my children. And so when I started my pregnancy with Connor, it was tricky because there just really wasn't any information about amputees and pregnancy. I could not really find anyone who was sharing their experience, and my prosthetist had no experience with somebody who had been pregnant and an amputee. So it was very hard to get any, I just had to kind of feel it out all on my own and figure it out. And mostly it was a time when I had to go in a lot more. I had to get in a lot more adjustments because of weight changes and fluctuations. I had to be careful with how my body was feeling and really stay in tune to it. So the two things that I did were, one, going in, I got a new socket, I got whatever I needed adjusted for that period. And the other thing was that I went in once a month and had a massage. It was just an absolute necessity for my body, and it did help me walk all the way through my pregnancy, which was a goal. Having my mobility was really important to me, and my mobility is definitely my prosthetic leg. That is the best way. So being able to walk all the way through my pregnancy felt like a really great achievement. It was really because I was taking care of my body the whole time. Then for my second pregnancy, I kind of knew what to expect, and that made it a little bit easier in that way. I already figured it out once, so it wasn't too hard to figure it out again. But I would say that after that pregnancy, I really realized that my walking had deteriorated some. Between like the stretching of my abdominal muscles over 2 pregnancies, and then always having like a stroller or pram kind of to lean on while I was walking, I had really gotten used to having some sort of assistive device. And even though it was a mobile stroller, that assistive device was actually helping me quite a bit. So really, that lasted, I didn't really realize it was happening until way after my pregnancies, because there's about a 3-year difference between our kids, between Connor and Aster. And so there was like 6 years or something of really regularly using some sort of stroller or cart or something to like put the kids in while we're shopping. And it wasn't until we were really stopping using the stroller that I realized my walking feels so much harder. I had gotten used to being much more centered and had lost being used to kind of having my limp. And so then going back to having my limp and not being able to walk as far felt like such a setback. And it was partially because my core was not quite as strong, and partially because I'd just gotten used to being more centered and going further. So that's really when I started using my walking stick. And ever since then, I have consistently used my walking stick because it helps my back health so much. My back, no matter what, does a lot of work for holding together my core and stability, because I don't have the muscles in my leg and hip to really do it. And so my back and core do a lot of work, and having my walking stick really, really makes a big difference. Now, I did intentionally choose to use a walking stick instead of a cane because, well, I think my walking stick looks a little cooler, so there's definitely a little bit of vanity there. But also it collapses down really small, and I love being able to just tuck it away when I don't want it. And I can really easily like just attach it to a bag or a backpack if I don't want it. it's just easy to get rid of when I don't need it, and I think it's much harder to get rid of a cane than the walking stick. It's just bulkier, they don't tend to collapse as tight, and if they do, they still take up more space. I also really like that I have multiple holds for my walking stick, so I can hold it straight up and down like this, or I can hold it like this, and it has a really wide range of like height variability. Sometimes I like to vary that up because it helps my arm not get fatigued if we're walking a lot, or like a spot of skin or something not rub, because I can change where I am holding my stick. My amputee journey definitely feeds into our full-time travel life. When I was going through my chemotherapy treatment, I was granted a wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and my wish was to go to Kauai. So my family and I went to Kauai, and we had the most amazing time. And that was really the first big trip I ever took. It was, flying over an ocean and being in a place that felt so different from where I grew up, but also a little bit the same, and just a little bit of different culture and a little bit of different food and all of that. So I think that trip really planted the seed for travel in me. And then in high school, I went to Edinburgh, Scotland with my theater group, and that just planted that seed, even fertilized it, watered it even a little bit more. And then when Anthony and I met, we did quite a bit of travel. He already was traveling quite a bit before we met, and so that just planted the seed and fertilized it more. But I really felt determined to get the most out of life having survived. I just felt so passionately about getting the opportunity to experience as much as I could. It's just not guaranteed. You just don't know what you're going to get. And I knew that from a really early age. I also don't know what my mobility is going to look like as I get older. And I have to be really truthful with myself about that. So it's super important to me to get these opportunities when I can. I just want to get as much as I can. And I want to show our kids how important that is too. They may get it or they may not. There's no guarantees. But I hope they have a little bit of an example of really following the things that you feel are important to you. It's been 30 years since I became an amputee, and that seems like such a huge number, but I know it's only going to be bigger and bigger. I'm so thankful for that number growing. What's happening next for us is we just are loving traveling. We love that we have a place to come back to in Japan, and I'm working on getting my next awesome computerized knee so that I can continue to live a full life. Thank you so much for letting me share my story. I hope you got to know me a little bit better, and maybe you have experienced something like this before, whether it's an amputation or just something that is kind of rocks your world in a way that makes you think of that big picture and really look at the priorities in your life and what you really want to get out of it so that you are making choices that are meaningful to you. I will see you next time.